I'm a college dropout myself. I think you dropped out of grad school. I dropped out of undergrad. But so can you tell us
You
that
figured
story?
out,
What's
yeah,
that?
you actually succeeded a lot faster than I did. I had to come to the realization that school really wasn't for me. And unfortunately, it cost me about 100 grand and 8 years of education to be able to come to that realization.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Entrepreneurship is actually a calling. It's something that I don't necessarily choose to do. I talk to my friends all the time about how I think entrepreneurs more have to kind of come out of the closet. There are people that are just like, I'm an entrepreneur because I can't do anything else. We were talking before the podcast that for me, entrepreneurship is really one of those things that I can do well because I can't do anything else well. And I've been fired or quit pretty much any other job that I've had within about 3 months. I remember one of the jobs that I quit, I was selling water coolers door to door, which was a horrible job, but it does teach you how to sell. And I highly suggest that anybody that's interested in getting into entrepreneurship, spend 3 months being a door-to-door salesman. It's a fantastic way for you to just get into that flow of people slamming doors in your face all day long.
It's a rough going for sure.
It is a rough going, but once you've built that skill, it's an incredibly valuable skill that you can take with you.
Right.
So I was doing okay at selling water coolers. And then I realized, well, I'm selling water coolers to individual houses. What if I go into a business, like a big, huge office building? I could sell like 40 water coolers in one go. And so I walked into a couple office buildings and I struck a deal. It's like going SMB versus enterprise, right?
Right.
And I ended up selling 40 water coolers. And then the next week I sold another 40 water coolers. And I ended up becoming the best water cooler salesman in the entire country of Canada. And then very quickly, my manager was saying, well, what are you doing here? Like, this is crazy. And I said, well, I'm selling to these big office buildings. And he said, you can't sell to office buildings. We are only allowed to sell to individual businesses, or sorry, individual houses. We're not allowed to sell to businesses. And I said, this is ridiculous. I can do one deal and it's, 3 weeks of me walking around trying to sell 40 water coolers.
Was that some kind of government regulation or the company policy?
I think it was the government. I didn't really pay attention, to be completely honest with you, because what I did is I walked right out the door and I went right into some more businesses. And instead of filling out one sales contract for 40 water coolers, I filled out 40 sales contracts for 40 individual water coolers that were all just going to the same address. I got caught within about a month and a half. And they fired me. But to me, I mean, again, I think that entrepreneurship is really either you get dominated by someone else's system or you create your own. And in my perspective, it's just, if you're one of those people that can't live inside of those confines, then entrepreneurship is really the only avenue that's open to you.
Yeah, I do it because I don't know what else to, like, I couldn't imagine going back and knocking on doors asking for employment again. Like, it just seems like the most bizarre thing in the world to me. I can go and ask, hey, I'd love for you to be my client. I'd love to work with you. But asking for a job again just seems so far out of anything that I could ever do. And then working for another person, I mean, I had the discipline to come in and do the job and stuff like that, but it's just not something that would make me very happy. And I am very happy doing my 12-hour days, doing the things that I like doing, and I scatter them all over the place. Now, you had a couple of different companies that you started before Time Doctor, and you exited one of them to go back to school. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Why you chose to exit? Was that, long-term a good decision, bad decision? Can you tell us that story a little bit?
Sure. So throughout grad school, I ended up teaching a class. And for those of you that don't know, in universities and colleges, the vast majority of first and second year classes are actually taught by graduate students. They're not taught by professors. This class that I taught, I think I started with about 300 students, and I ended the semester with less than half of that number. And I got the worst academic reviews in the history of the department. The department had been running for over 135 years. So it wasn't very good news. I remember walking into my supervisor's office.
You got to be the best at
and
something.
I said, yeah, I walked into my supervisor's office and I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, no, you are not. And then I said, so what do you think I should do? He said, well, you got to get pretty good at this teaching thing, because if you want to actually enter academia, you've got to do this for the next 10 to 20 years before you get to do anything fun. So 6 weeks later, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I was out into the real world, and turned that actually into one of my first remote businesses, which was an online tutoring company that ended up having dozens of tutors throughout North America and Europe, teaching them how to primarily go after the pre-med prerequisites, which were a real critical set of courses that you needed to be able to enter med school.
Okay, wonderful. So, and then you end up selling that company, the tutor company?
So yes, that was actually, I had sold another company before that, which was a sporting goods company to be able to enter grad school. And then I started this other business, the remote business. And then out of that remote business, I recognized a core problem, which was a tutor would work with a student, but I couldn't actually tell how many hours the tutor worked with the student because it was virtual, it was remote.
Right.
And this was back in 2006, 2007, I believe. So there wasn't any of this technology available. So what I needed was something that specifically measured how long two remote individuals work together on a particular task or a project. And that was the initial iteration of Time Doctor, which we've been running for 12 years.
And in a business like where you're supplying talent to an end user, it's really important to be able to tell that time, because if you can't, then you can't defend your position, because they can just make a side deal with that person and then cut you out of the deal, right? It's like Uber drivers saying, hey, give this cell phone call, this seller call, and I'll come pick you up, and we'll just bypass Uber altogether.
Yeah, we actually did run a two-sided marketplace as well called staff.com, which the core problem inside of that business, and there's other platforms like Upwork. Before that, there was Odesk and Elance that merged into Upwork, Freelancer, Fiverr. And one of the interesting phenomenons that occurred is, first off, most of those platforms were long-term workers. So people that would work for extended amounts of time. But inside of that, staff.com included, we recognized that there was secret churn. So there were people that were quitting that didn't really want to tell us why they were quitting, but the real reason why they were quitting is they wanted to cut us out of the transaction. They didn't want us to take the 10% that we were making inside of our own, inside of our platform. They instead wanted to pay that directly to the employee, or the employee would say, listen, pay me 5% more and I'll work for you exclusively. So this was a real problem inside of those platforms until actually Fiverr came about, which was really focused on very small micro gigs that were done, where it didn't really matter whether or not it was Ken who was, doing the work for me. I just needed the work done. And the rest of the industry has actually moved in the direction of Fiverr, as opposed to the industry moving towards long-term work agreements, which has been a really interesting thing for me to see. I never thought I'd see that in the remote work world.
Yeah, it's frustrating for me in a lot of cases, because it's hard to find today, in a world that's hard to find employees in general. People really love this gig economy, and it's hard to find dedicated staff that's going to stay with you for a long period of time. And I value tribal knowledge in a company is so valuable, and it's hard to get. It's becoming harder and harder to get, right? Because it's hard to keep people with you for a long time. We're only going to
see it accelerate, to be completely honest with you. Pre-pandemic, 4.5% of the U.S. workforce was working remotely. Post-pandemic, it was 45%. We're probably going to see it settle out at about 30% of the U.S. workforce working remotely forever. And that number is going to probably go back up next year. So we're going to see a complete transition of work. And inside of that segment of the 30% of the US workforce working remotely, if you make more than $100,000 a year, 75% of those workers are working remotely. So the A players, the high-end workers, are now saying remote work isn't a perk, it's table stakes. This is what I want to be able to do. If I want to come into the office, I'll tell you when I want to come into the office.
Right.
But fundamentally for me, leave me alone. I actually just want to get this work done inside of the company. And I want to be able to work the way that I want to work. For someone that's been in remote work for almost 20 years, this is a very exciting time for me, but it's also it's a massive time of transition. I think that we've never seen this level of change to work since the Industrial Revolution, but the Industrial Revolution took about 80 years, and we did this in March of 2020.
Right. Yeah, 2 years we made this. Oh yeah, I guess within those first 3 months when we never came back to work after those the 3 months shutdown.
It was emergency remote work. I lovingly
Yes.
call those people pandemic panickers. It was hey, we have to go remote work tomorrow.
Right.
I had, within the first week of after President Trump gave his address to basically shut down the United States, and the rest of the world very quickly followed, I got a phone call from a G20 government that was saying, hey, we have 500,000 people inside of our company, and we're trying to get them all remote, like today.
Right.
Can you help us with that? And I said, well, I have about 150 people. So I'm not the type of, I really can't help you. I can't approach that type of change. Right. And I remember the response from this individual. He said, you're the first one that's picked up the phone, because the industry was so minuscule before the pandemic.
So you had the benefit of being in an industry prior to a black swan event, which is the pandemic. How critical is that to the success of Time Doctor today?
So Time Doctor was successful before the pandemic. We saw an exponential jump during the pandemic. In 2020 alone, we grew over 200%. Wow. Which is a big shift for an 8-figure SaaS business. It's a big jump for us.
Right.
We had to completely rebuild all of our operational processes. We had to completely rebuild our executive team, our organization. I think more than doubled during that time. And I remember around February, I saw a game show with, they have these like big, huge tubes, and there's like a hurricane wind going around with dollar bills, and you have like these people that just stuff dollar bills into their bra. That was basically the pandemic for me for the first 6 months, which was, listen, whatever I can do to be able to try to help, number one, help people through this really difficult process. But there were people that were, coming to me saying, hey, can you negotiate on price? I said, nope. Price is the price. We've got a list of people that are waiting to be able to get access to this system because we don't have the server capacity to be able to serve everybody. So get in line. It was a very interesting time for us, but we would have hit those numbers regardless. It just literally accelerated the entire industry about 5 years.
Right. Fantastic. So is it safe to say that Time Doctor is a bunch of tools that you've put together on core problems from previous businesses that you've uncovered, and this is a solution for a lot of those problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's rule number 3 of entrepreneurship. Always scratch your own itch. So there are days in everyone's entrepreneurial journey where they're pretty dark, right? You can't pay bills. No one will want to buy your product. Your last customer quits, that kind of a thing. Yep. And at that point, if you really don't love what you're doing, if you're not passionate about your subject matter, you're probably going to quit. But if it's something that is something that you've always wanted to solve for years, or you really love the types of customers that you have inside of your organization, that's what's going to get you through to the point in which you can have a black swan event, as an example, where you have 200% plus growth in just 1 year.
Yeah, I'm positive. I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't have specific examples, but there were companies that were doing similar stuff to you that probably shut down months or years before the pandemic hit. That could have been the catalyst for them to make it to the next level, but they didn't have the tenacity to get to that black swan event that turned so many companies into gold mines, right? I mean, companies like Zoom were doing good before the pandemic, but boy, oh boy, they did fantastic post-pandemic, right?
There's a big thesis that I would really touch on, which is looking at it from the context of the digitization of the economy. So I know we're talking about clicks and bricks, right?
Right.
And there will always be that hybrid of physical and digital. But I think we're actually in the first inning of the digitization of the economy. I think very soon we're going to see way more of those companies transition to either a remote or at least a hybrid model moving forward. And as we see a lot more of those $100,000 plus employees say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to work in an office anymore. I'm going to maybe work one day at an office, or maybe I'm going to go to Bali and I'm going to continue to work for you, but I'm going to work remotely and I'm going to travel the world. All of these things are going to happen. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting 2022 to 2025 as it applies to work.
Absolutely. Now, Time Doctor, who is the best customer for Time Doctor? Like, if you were to paint the perfect picture that solves the problem for a company, what kind of company is that the Time Doctor would be the best fit for?
So it's any company that's interested in transitioning to remote or hybrid, or has already transitioned to remote or hybrid. And more specifically, it's a company where you may be located in the United States, but you may have a distributed workforce that's all over the world. So we have team members in 43 different countries right now. And it's very, very difficult to be able to recognize, number one, what they're all doing, but then also to be able to keep them accountable to what they're doing. So Time Doctor is a fantastic tool to be able to make that happen.
Wonderful. And inside that, for Time Doctor, so any company doing remote, hybrid, or both, is it a good solution if you don't have any hybrid workers, just to maintain a staff? If you had 20 people in an office together, would that be helpful as well?
Yeah, we do have a lot of clients that live inside of an office environment, but to a degree, we actually see it as a bit of a Trojan horse. So if you're in an office environment, you can use Time Doctor, and then it doesn't necessarily matter if they're in the office or outside of the office, because you have the same level of accountability. So that's what really people are looking for is, do I know that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and not even paying attention to how much time they spend on a task, but what tasks do they get done while they're working at, whatever they're doing. So you may actually counterintuitively have someone that works half the time. And we see this all the time inside of Time Doctor, primarily due to our machine learning. We might have one worker that can get as much done in half the time as another worker. And then we really try to figure out, well, what is that person doing that makes them way more successful at that position?
Or maybe they're not doing it properly. Is another
or maybe they're not doing it properly. And then on the other side, we're saying, okay, someone who's struggling, how can we actually make them a lot more efficient at their job? Because they might actually be working super hard, but they're not actually able to achieve anything because they're taking a really long way around to actually get to the solution that they're looking for.
Absolutely. So Time Doctor is integrated with the phone. I mean, it knows about your phone calls, it knows about your emails, it knows about all these things. Is it a hard thing to get set up for a company? Like, where does Time Doctor live? Is it a server inside the building? Is it on the desktop? Like, where does it live? What is the experience if I'm talking to an IT manager and saying, hey, you're going to start tracking everybody's calls and their emails and all this stuff and get all this information? That sounds to me like a pretty big undertaking as an IT guy. So
it's
where
relatively
does that live?
simple.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've had organizations of tens of thousands of people set up within 5 minutes. That's the life of self-serve, self-serve products. Self-serve SaaS is the ability to be able to just log in, you upload your all of your customers, all of your team members to Time Doctor. And then within about 5 minutes, they can all download the desktop application. It's a task management app, just like anything else. and they can choose what tasks they're currently working on. They can import tasks from other project management systems. So if they're using like Asana or Google Docs or anything like that, they can have all those tasks inside of one particular place. And then you as the employer can be able to measure, okay, what is someone doing with their time and how can they be more efficient while they're actually working on the tasks that you've given them.
So Time Doctor is really going to view my Taskmaster tools and then build algorithms and chore lists based on all my other tools. It's not a replacement for Asana. It lives with Asana. Is that
so
correct?
You can't, unfortunately, we're not at a point where we could say, here's the magical task that you need to do next.
Right.
That would be amazing. I would have $1 trillion company if that happened. Maybe that will actually happen in the future. That could be an interesting direction, but we currently don't have the capability.
I've got an idea
now.
and a URL that we should talk about after the show. But,
there we go.
Yeah.
I mean, the predictive work could actually be a really interesting concept to be able to work on. But what we can do is we can tell people, here's what you've done historically, and here are the suggestions that we would make in order for you to be able to become more successful at your job. Or if you are already incredibly successful, we can tell you, we can say, hey, you know what? You're actually one of the most time efficient people inside of the company. And in that case, we encourage employers to be able to give their employees a lot of perks as it applies to that. We have, inside of the call center industry, there's this terminology called platinums. And almost every call center has platinums, which is the top 10th percentile of their call center team. And those people are allowed to do whatever the hell they want. One of the things that we really study is, how do platinums tick? What makes them tick? How are they efficient at their job? Why are they so much better than any of the other reps inside of the organization? And there's a lot of counterintuitive insights that come out of that data.
Yeah, and managers that think like that end up, I think, doing really well. Like my best example, and this is probably not the best place to talk about my experience in this particular realm, is I used to be a bartender. And I was a bartender that brought in a lot of money. I was really, really efficient, right? I had a really great, on slow nights, I could turn it into a really big party. And the bosses let me do whatever I wanted because I could turn Monday nights into a $20,000, $30,000 night. And it's important for managers to understand that about employees. As long as they stay in that top 10% of productivity, let them do what they want to do. Like, as long as it's not illegal or they're not hurting anybody, right? If they want to take 10 smoke breaks or an extra 30-minute lunch break because it's what they do to decompress, to come back and crush it like they do, let them have it. They're the most productive people in the company. That's
exactly what I was going to say, is the 10 smoke breaks a day may actually be why they're more productive than everyone
Probably
else.
Not long-term the best case for them, but...
I mean... Lung cancer is a thing, but fundamentally, whatever those, when we just strip away all of the presumptions around work and we just focus on what are the actual results of work, that's where really counterintuitive stuff starts to pop up that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to get access to. And again, you can't really see this on a one-off basis, but when you have hundreds of thousands of workers all over the planet that are all putting their data into one system, and then we're using machine learning to be able to actually pull out insights from it, it's pretty interesting stuff.
You are the founder of Time Doctor, is that correct?
Co-founder, yes.
Co-founder.
With my business partner, Rob.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about what Time Doctor does, where you're from, just a basic intro, so that we get to know you and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So, human being on planet Earth, currently in Montreal, Canada, which is quite cold today, but the sun is out. And I've been the co-founder of a company called Time Doctor for almost 11 years, which is really what we call a Fitbit for work. So we analyze all of the different metrics that associate someone with successful and unsuccessful work, and then we can actively make suggestions as to whether or not you should spend more time in sales calls or more time in your CRM or more time in your email. as an example, because we can optimize every single individual towards maximum productivity. That's why we are the time doctor. And we've been doing that, as I said, for about 11 years. And we've got a couple other projects as well that all focus on a core mission, which is empowering the world's transition towards remote work.
Wonderful. Now, on the surface, when I looked at Time Doctor, and I'll be honest, I didn't do a deep dive. I just kind of looked at the surface and I said, oh, it's a nice time clock, timekeeping, taskmaster kind of app. But right out of the gate, your elevator pitch blows that out of the water with really individualizing, what an individual do. How do you determine, should I spend more time on the phone versus should I be sending more emails? Are you using algorithms from all of your clients to kind of come up with that, what the best strategy is? Or are you using some kind of psychological testing for individual users to say what would they be most efficient at?
So we have the largest second by second work database on the planet. And wow. Because of that, we have hundreds of thousands of users all over the world that do a lot of different jobs. And we can also identify within about a day or two what your job is, just based off of how you use Time Doctor. So if you log into Salesforce, as an example, and you do sales calls on an auto dialer, well, we know that you are a salesperson, so that we can throw you into that particular box with all the other salespeople. And we use relatively simplistic machine learning. The crazy thing about artificial intelligence is the more data that you have, the easier AI is to be able to get really precise assessments of what people should be doing with their time. And then with that information, we can make very specific strategic suggestions to individuals. And then also managers can be able to get strategic directions on, maybe you should use this other piece of technology as an example in your workflow, because it's a major part that's missing inside of your sales team. And you should look at using that because it's going to save you a lot more time and money.
Wonderful. So you can kind of say, hey, when Jimmy at company A was doing 50% calls and 50% emails, and when he moved that to 70% calls and 30% emails, the company made a lot more money. You can kind of see that play out and then make that suggestion to other people that are that 50-50 split phone call and email. Is that? Yes,
except we don't have just one Jimmy. We have 7,000 Jimmys. So right. When you look at it from a big data amalgamation perspective, you can start to see signals that come out of the noise. Relatively simplistically, everyone that kind of looks at artificial intelligence, they have this joke, which is machine learning was artificial intelligence last year. And so we use a lot of machine learning inside of what we're currently doing, which is effectively just very large scale statistics to be able to say, if one group does X, then does their productivity go up or down? And we just do that literally, I think 32,000 times. There's 32,000 different variables just apply to salespeople, as an example, inside of the company. And then we will give you suggestions based off that.
So, I run a couple different companies, and I have time clock issues and time off task issues and all those kinds of things. And I'm a fairly conservative guy, but my management style is really liberal. Like, hey, you do your thing and you let me know what you need, and we'll try to do that. But the time tracking has, it's never an issue when you have a really passionate employee that wants to grow, but it is an issue when you have what I would just call regular employees, right? They're not vested in the company. They're here doing their job, right? Then it becomes a real big issue. On a philosophical level, how bad of a situation is mankind in when computers are telling us what we should be doing with our time?
Boy, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think that within the next 10 years, there will be an AI assistant for pretty much everything that you do. So work, sleep. I mean, I have this thing called an Oura ring, which is literally a ring that will tell me, it does really cool stuff. Like, it told me when I had COVID. If I've gone drinking the night before, it will literally.
You had COVID?
Yeah, it can predict COVID with an 85% success rate,
wow.
Which is really interesting stuff. And literally told me, hey, I think you have COVID. I took a test. I had COVID. So it's really cool technology that's all coming out. And this is all just based off of relatively simplistic machine learning. And some people would call that artificial intelligence. Again, it's a tomato type of situation, but
Right.
everyone is going to be augmented by artificial intelligence. We already see it today. We see, the vast majority of social media is AIs knowing exactly what to give you next to be able to
Right.
get the maximum responance. And they're pretty darn good at it.
A
So
high percentage of accuracy. 85% is pretty
Absolutely.
accurate, right? I mean, I wouldn't put all my money on the table at 85%, but I'd put a lot of it on the table at 85%. Now,
Yeah,
I
so,
like to
I mean,
call it augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence, because all the variables are created by us, right? We're putting all those variables in, we're creating the algorithm, right? So I call that an augmented intelligence, right? I've given it this data and I'm running the job and it's going to tell me some potential results, is kind of where,
right.
at least my opinion of artificial intelligence is now.
Yeah, I would probably say we're pretty far off from basically an AI that can think on its own. Really, what we're effectively looking at right now is very complicated forms of statistics. Not to necessarily get too technical, but more of a
Right.
Bayesian algorithm, which looks at a whole bunch of interaction effects and how they interact with each other, as opposed to looking at dependent and independent variables, which is a much more different way of looking at statistics. Humans understand simple statistics quite well, but if you gave a human 32,000 different variables and asked that human, how do they interact, you would not be able to do it. Humans just don't think that way, but AIs do.
Right. And they can take all that data, parse it really fast, and then say, hey, this is a commonality amongst these variables and a commonality amongst these variables over here, right? And then make surprisingly accurate predictions based on all of those things. Now, as that becomes more and more popular, right? And I always kind of like to think about the outliners of the world, right? Because that's where I like to live. Now, as AI becomes more and more adopted, right? And let's just use a program like Salesforce. So Salesforce is the most popular sales tool on the planet today, I believe. And I'm making some assumptions that they have some machine learning in the background. I don't work there, I can't say for them. And they're making recommendations to users, right? So, and those users are typically just doing them. I think in the future, do you see a situation to where mankind can kind of outmaneuver artificial intelligence if the masses are doing it this way? I mean, mankind loves the guy doing something a little bit different, right? So is there opportunity for outliners to try different things outside of the machine learning? Is that going to create new opportunities? Or do you think the machine learning is just going to be so good that those opportunities won't exist anymore?
There's a fantastic documentary on an AI that learns how to beat almost any human being at Go, which is, if you don't know the Chinese board game of Go, it's like chess times 10. It's very, very complicated. And one of the things that they discovered during this documentary, again, we could probably bring it up or I can email it to you afterwards. If you just, it's on Netflix or it's on Amazon or something like that. And one of the things that this AI discovered is that the AI built completely new innovative ways of playing that no human had ever interacted with before. And within 5 years of this AI basically beating all of these human beings, that humans learned those new innovative techniques from the AI and actually implemented that inside of the way that they play.
Right.
So I think probably AIs are really looking at, think about it in this context. What if you could wake up in the morning and you could know 7 million ways of living your day, of your work day? You know, oh, I'm going to move left, I'm going to move right, I'm going to send this email instead of that email. And you're able to kind of like simulate that in your mind and then figure out the optimal route to be able to do your work. That's a pretty difficult thing to be able to fight against if you're a human being. Right. I really hope that human innovation is at a point in which those, you know, they could basically kind of like break the matrix. But I don't have that much faith, unfortunately, that human beings will actually be able to break it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought of how the future is going to line out with technology as fast as it's getting, and it seems really intelligent, right? It knows all these variables, and it can crush those numbers way faster than man can. And maybe we figure out, if Elon can get that implant in us, then maybe we can see those kinds of futures if our brain can even handle that. I can tell you,
I work with artificial intelligence to a small degree.
Right.
What would have cost us $20 million 5 years ago costs us $2 million now to develop. And it's going to be $200,000 in another 5 years. I am
absolutely
proponent. I am a proponent of saying that this type of technology needs to be controlled by governments. I think that AIs are more dangerous than nuclear weapons. They're more dangerous than chemical weapons. Probably the biggest singular concern that I have for the future of humanity is the proliferation of artificial intelligence. And unfortunately, I think it's going to result in one of these AIs getting loose and creating a lot of damage in the world before we can recognize that, and governments can basically put in some type of guardrails for AIs.
Right.
I think it's crazy that I can build any type of AI that I want right now, and the government allows me to do that. I think it's a very, very dangerous piece of technology. Because
it's just ones and zeros at the end of the day, right? I mean, and
ones and zeros that can destroy the entire planet. Yes,
yeah.
But they're pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, there's AIs right now that I don't know if you can say they're running our stock market. I'm sure that there's some governances in place that a person has to verify the transactions and all those things. But I've definitely played with trading bots and things like that could, they can go rogue and destroy an individual's personal income within a couple of seconds on accident if you click the wrong button. So I'm sure that the same kind of thing can happen out in the world, right? And
when I think of one of the scariest applications of AI that exists right now, I think about Peter Thiel's Palantir. Palantir only has about 12 customers. They're all spy agencies all over planet Earth, and they predict actions to be able to turn an individual over to that particular spy agency. So what button can I push to be able to get that person to work for me? And Palantir makes billions of dollars every single year because they have these advanced AI algorithms that are able to, again, look at all of these different variables and figure out, if I go after your second cousin, I know that then you're going to want to do a deal with me. And these exist right now. There are companies there are organizations that use it, and it is absolutely terrifying. And within 5 years, it currently already is being used to a degree. It's Facebook, it's YouTube, it's TikTok. It is all of those variables that are just optimizing towards how do I keep you sitting on the toilet and flipping through TikTok an extra 5 minutes. And they're very, very good at doing it.
They're very good at doing it. And the world is, it feels to me like the entire planet is driving at full speed towards this new world that we're going to all get to unwrap together, right? And understand what's going to happen. Because I don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to be wild, crazy. There's going to be a lot of heartache, and there's going to be a lot of joy. But I'm super excited about the future of technology. So if I'm out there and I'm watching this show today and I want to get started with Time Doctor, how do I get started?
Go to timedoctor.com, sign up. You got a 14-day free trial. We have customer success agents and all that kind of stuff that can help you get all set up. And we tell people that if you spend 14 days and you don't find an interesting insight that you wouldn't have otherwise found before, I'll give you all the time and money back that you spent on the trial.
Wonderful. That's a pretty big statement. So if I download the thing and I spend 10 hours of labor on it, you're saying you're going to guarantee that 10 hours of labor if I don't find anything worthwhile?
Sure. Yeah. We've never been proven wrong before.
That's putting your money where your mouth
really
is for
interesting
sure.
Stuff to find.
That's a pretty dang good guarantee. So sounds great. Liam, thank you for your time today. I've had such a blast talking to you about machine learning and the future of technology. I had a blast. Is there anything you would like to lead the audience with? Any keywords or statements?
Timedoctor.com. If anyone is interested in interacting with me personally, YouTube's the best spot, youtube.com/runningremote, where we give away free talks on remote work all day long. And I do videos every single week on there. If you give me a comment, I'll respond to you almost immediately. It is me on there. Every other form of social media, it's not me, but YouTube is the real me. And then outside of that, remote work is going to be really exciting for everyone. And I think that everyone needs to recognize that it's not just a perk anymore. It's something that everyone has to learn as a core skill set. So start doing it now or you'll be left behind.
As the workforce is going to change, we're going to have a lot of reiterations of what the workforce in the world looks like over the next 5 and 10 years. I mean, we could have another pandemic event, anything can happen, but the people have spoken. They want different, and boy, oh boy, are we getting different right now at a pretty big space. So again, thank you for your time today, Liam. I very much appreciate it, and I hope to talk again soon. That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do is ask me any question about business or technology. I'll do the research and give you an absolutely free, unbiased answer. Get to work.